Farmer Tom here. Welcome to the Farmer Tomcast. Today on our ongoing Heroes of the Green, we have Donna Hackett, legendary cancer survivor and advocate of the plant. Want to give you this opportunity to tell your story as it relates to cannabis, where you grew up, all that kind of fun stuff.
I grew up in Sharon, Massachusetts, one of the nicest towns in Massachusetts. And I was introduced to cannabis my freshman year. My sister knew I could write good notes and gave me a banana joint, which I enjoyed immensely. And I ended up being in love with the plant right then and there. I graduated high school in 3 years, so that puts to the end to the myth that cannabis doesn't mix well with teenagers, or it ruins their mind. I graduated in 3 years, and I smoked cannabis almost all the time. That my love started there. It's funny. Jumping ahead a little bit, when my son ended up becoming a grower, he's the first things he said to me is, his childhood made more sense to him because he figured out all those times that I had sprinkled magical things all over the house or made crazy forts or had Ninja Turtle fights. It was because I got to smoke a big fat doobie before I went in the room and had to play with 8 kids that were hyperactive, you know. It's always been by my side through motherhood. My husband always got me a planter with a flower at Mother's Day, and underneath would have an ounce in it. This whole entire journey through my life, I've always had cannabis in it. I was fortunate to be in a somewhat upper middle class town, so I was exposed to some good cannabis when I was younger. I remember having Thai stick quite often, and just Maui Wowie. We had some very good strains, so it wasn't just all dried up, swag or Mexican brickweed. I was very fortunate to be exposed to many different strains, and so going along with my life, cannabis was always by my side. Before I did anything, my wedding day, I smoked a joint before my wedding day. And then when my kids were a senior in high school and a junior in high school in 2007, I became very sick in the summer with Lyme disease, stage 3. It was very advanced. And while they were treating me for that, they made me get a physical and they found breast cancer. So this October, it will be 15 years since I heard the words, "You have cancer." It was stage 3, like my Lyme disease. So I battled 2 stage 3 diseases, literally 3 months apart. To say it wreaked havoc on my body and my mind, ridiculous. I can't even share with that someone who hasn't been to those depths. We lived in Rhode Island was a medical marijuana state at the time. I was absolutely thrilled to find that out. I was like, well, at least I can grow my own marijuana. My son was very, very good at gardening, always since he was a child. And I said, start growing pot. I have one of the qualifying conditions. Well, the systems back then were so draconian, so out of touch with reality. They would make bills and laws and not even know the full depth of them or how people were supposed to access this medicine. They didn't really want anything to do with it, so they didn't try to solve the problems. It took people like myself coming out and saying that we were having trouble getting our cards signed. In 2008, I was raided while I was undergoing chemo and radiation. My entire time I went through cancer treatments, I was in the court system, not knowing if I was going to go to jail. The type of charges that they gave you for cultivations in states like Rhode Island were 30 years. 30 years for conspiracy, 30 years for nuisance, 30 years for cultivation. Under the law, I had the legal amount of plants that would have been allowed for my condition. But because I couldn't get a signature from a doctor, I was treated that way. My son, who was my grower, got stuck with a record out of it because back then they didn't even want to bring it to trial. They didn't want to use the affirmative defense. They didn't want to use anything to help the people like myself. They only wanted to do a plea deal, get it off their plate. I mean, my attorney was a mob attorney, and he had better things to do than deal with some. Actually, one of the things he said to me that turned me into an activist. I know this is going to piss you off, Farmer Tom. When my son took the plea deal, I said to him, that I was mad, and I said, you just let him, the nicest kid in the world, who was helping his mom, who was for all intents and purposes dying, and you stuck him with a record, and I didn't want that. And he said to me, well, after all, Donna, you're just a pot smoking mom who was lucky enough to get cancer, so you should, count yourself lucky. That just turned my Irish up so much. That was it. That day, when we came home from the police station, we put the Mylar back up on the walls, and we said, screw them, I'll get a signature. And it took me a while. It really did. But we started growing right again that night. Like, no. The police even felt bad. I was so sick. I had no hair. I was bald. And they said, lady, we saw the fishbowl in your room filled with pills. We know how sick you are. We feel bad. When they left my house, they left 4 packed bowls because they knew that it was my medicine, and that in order to get through the night, I was going to need that. So they did have some compassion, but I mean, it just blows my mind when I look back at all that has happened in the last 15 years. And I cannot say that there has been any bad times in being a pot advocate. Let's face it, we get the best weed. We smoke like crazy amounts of it. I love being a pot advocate. So you know what? The police actually did me a favor because I've had an awesome 15 years. And I'm still here. I have benefited from this plant so much. I owe myself to this plant. And I know my son and my daughter both feel the same way. For us, it is definitely a Canna family affair. We all love cannabis. It levels us out. Each one of us are in charge of our own bodies, figuring out what's the right blend. For me, hash oil works the best for my multitude of conditions. I have fibromyalgia, I have COPD, I have many conditions, all spin-offs from cancer. And for me, the best pain medicine is hash oil. So I dab frequently throughout the day. But it's helping so many families not drink too much. Like, for us, Thanksgiving really is Thanksgiving. We start with medicated Belgian waffles. The entire day is surrounded by cannabis consumption. And for us, that's very normal. One of the things that I'm very disappointed in our community is I don't believe there's enough sharing of how we all have adapted our family lives to include cannabis in a more important role in our lives. Like we don't have family activities that aren't, the cake is either medicated or we're doing dabs on the table all day, and that's normal for us. And we haven't done enough to educate people that don't understand cannabis that it's just the same as you having wine at your Christmas party or, beer at the football game. This is how we celebrate life. It is incorporated in every aspect of our life. It is our medicine. It is our relaxation. It is everything to us. And I'm ready for a question because I don't know what else to say right now.
No worries. So tell us about how your bust in the raid went down. Tell us the whole story. Seems like a critical point in your family's life.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that.
Oh, can you tell us about how the bust and the raid went down when you got arrested and they busted you? Busted you? Like, how did it go? Did a neighbor tell what? How did it all happen? Tell us the story.
So we had the right amount of plants that you would have under Rhode Island state law, and we were learning about being medical patients. I had the paperwork. I carried the paperwork with me because even if you don't have the doctor's signature, if you have the qualifying conditions by law, you're still supposed to be considered a legal patient. But what they say and what the DAs do are two totally different things. My daughter happened to not have a good relationship with someone, and she ended it. And he was not a nice person, and she had to take a restraining order against him. And she was actually didn't want to. She said, "Mommy, I don't want to. What about your plants?" And I said, absolutely never, ever let a man treat you badly, and don't worry about any of that. And sure enough, he flipped on us that, I didn't have my signature. And next thing I know, a month later, they busted down my door. They threatened my daughter. They threatened to shoot my dog. I happened to be delivering a kitten of all things to somebody, and pulled up the driveway. I had no hair. I ran up the driveway. I said, "Don't do anything to my daughter. Talk to me." And I said, "I'm a cancer survivor. I'm battling cancer, and I'm trying to be a patient." And they were just knuckleheads. I mean, they didn't care about anything I said. Absolutely anything. They thought I was a horrible mother that my kids that were almost 18 and 18 were subjected to pot in the house, and they were like from another planet. I mean, if I was forced to sit next to people like this in a room, I would never ever have anything to say to them because they were so narrow-minded. And they kind of manipulated me for a bit. And they said, "Let's go down to the station because we're going to pick your son up." And I was more worried about my son. And they never told me I was arrested. And then next thing I know, I was arrested. The whole thing was ridiculous. I mean, when they brought me into the interrogation room, I'll never forget it. I'm a fairly literal person, and I don't have a problem, obviously, entertaining or talking. So when they gave me a pad of paper and said I could write down, no, I wasn't going to confess to anything, but anything I could write down. I literally wrote down something that was like very 7 years ago. I was like, I am a free thinking American who is under the understanding that the police do not have a right to interfere with my life, liberty, or pursuit of happiness. You are taking away my health care, my happiness, and everything without any, provocation. And I was actually impressed with myself. I looked at it afterwards and I was like, I can still write a paper stone. It was awesome. So they weren't too happy with me because, I mean, like, I'm obviously not intimidated easily. And I thought it was disgusting that they had me at the police station for 6 hours, I think. And I was in chemo, the strongest chemo. They don't even do the chemo that I had anymore because it was so toxic to the human body. And I was in so much pain that they let me take 2 Percocets in the middle of our interview, which by law, they can't even do that. So, and they picked my son up, they arrested him. Then they picked my husband up, they arrested him. They didn't arrest my daughter because she was under 18 and it would have been too many hassles. So needless to say, we had to go through the court system. Meanwhile, I was, going through radiation and hormone treatments. I just got sicker and weaker and weaker and sicker. And they ended up telling me that they didn't even want to pursue charges against me anymore because I looked too sick. I would be too sympathetic to a jury. So they dropped all the charges against me. But in the meantime, they stuck it to my son. So he was stuck with the record, which now that Rhode Island is legal, we will pursue expungement.